Have you ever wondered what secrets hide in Canada's Nahanni, the legend-filled Headless Valley? Imagine vanishing footprints, chilling whispers, and the fear of joining lost travelers. Every story is 100% real, only names and private info changed for privacy. Would you dare explore these mountains alone at night? Tell us your city and current time in the comments. Join Haunted Fears for nightmares no one else will share. Subscribe now and never miss a true horror story. What would you do if a suffocating fog swallowed your camp and left you lost between reality and nightmare? Imagine venturing deep into the infamous Headless Valley, only to question whether anything in the mist ever wants you to leave. My name is Rowan, and I always thought that the real terror of isolation existed only in stories. When I set off on my solo trek into the Mackenzie Mountains, toward the legendary Headless Valley, I was hungry for adventure, not haunted legends. I'd grown up hearing tales of missing explorers, whispering winds, and skeletons found headless on remote riverbanks. But I saw myself as a rational explorer, grounded in science and skepticism, not superstition or fear. My goal was straightforward: hike off the popular routes, sample some unique stones for my geology thesis, and find out if the valley's reputation was just old folklore. September in the Northwest Territories brought its own kind of challenge. Cold creeping back into the world, and the forests full of muffled life. The sky had that endless, lonely quality that makes you feel both invincible and impossibly small. That first day, nature was generous. I spotted 2 moose along the Nahanni riverbank, glimpsed the flash of lynx eyes in the underbrush, and found so many strange stones near the white spruce trees that it almost felt staged. I wrote notes by lamplight, heated a tin of beans, and let the wind and distant wolf howls lull me into thinking I was the only living soul out there. The feeling of freedom was intoxicating. That changed the moment the fog arrived. It didn't roll in gradually. It poured over the land like a living, crawling smoke, blanketing everything. Standing in it, I felt air turn damp, heavy. Heat from my small fire faded until even its glow barely cut through the opaque white. The smell was sharp, almost metallic. I couldn't see more than a hand's span away, and sound warped, collapsing right at my feet. Telling myself it was just the weather, I zipped into my tent, clutching my journal and flashlight, the battery icon on my phone mocking me with its last red sliver. Sleep didn't come. The world outside pressed in, silent and thick, until my own heartbeat sounded like distant footsteps across sodden moss. Sometime in the deadest part of night, I woke to perfect silence. There were no animal calls, no wind, not even the trickle of the river nearby. The air tasted different, old and cold, and slightly caustic, like the aftermath of a lightning strike. There was a dragging noise circling the tent. I tried to steady my breathing, but it felt like something outside was trying to match me breath for breath. Against reason, I opened the flap. The tent was an island in a sea of white, my own pale hand floating in empty space when I reached out. Somewhere in the fog, something low and shuffling moved, almost human, and somehow wrong. I shouted, and what came back was not an echo, but a guttural rasp. "Rowan, help me." The voice made the hair on my neck stand at attention. I waited for it to repeat, but all I could hear was my own heart pounding and the relentless hush. I dove back into the tent, gripping my knife so tightly that I couldn't feel my fingers. The circling continued, slow, methodical drags and short stops, like a predator testing the walls of my shelter. When I checked the compass on my watch, the needle spun drunkenly, never pointing in the same direction for more than half a breath. I thought about running for the river, but every direction was lost to that pulsing wall of fog. Then, breath. The wet, desperate kind drawn by lungs filled with water, brushed against the nylon right next to my ear. I froze, unsure if running or staying silent would save me. The breath was joined by whispering, not quite words, but syllables circling the letters of my name. Rur. Owen. I spent the night in pieces, sleeping in fits, convinced dawn would end the madness. It didn't. I crawled out to find every trace of my hike, my boot prints, my trails, even the place where I collected stones, erased as if I'd just appeared there out of nowhere. The fog hadn't lifted. It pressed closer now, so dense and cold my hands throbbed just holding the walking stick. Desperate, I tried to use the river as my guide, moving along its course, but distance lost all meaning. I couldn't tell if I was walking in circles, if time had stopped, or if the ground itself shifted beneath me. I checked my map, then GPS, but nothing matched. The map a blurry memory, the GPS screen taunting me with errors. By the time I spotted the footprints outside my abandoned camp, I was numb with exhaustion and fear. They were massive, barefoot, arcing in a rough and broken circle. Too big to be human, too intimate to be animal. My fingers trembled as I traced them, the fog thicker between each step, curling in unnatural swirls. My nose burned as the air stung, harsher than before, and I staggered backward, certain that whatever had passed through was still close. Then, just as I thought I'd lost my mind, the same voice called again, louder, closer. "Rowan, help me." This time I saw the shadow, a bent figure, neck twisted, one arm too long, hovering at the very edge of what little vision the fog allowed. I wanted to scream, but my mouth wouldn't work. The thing never moved forward, but I couldn't move away. The chase that followed is mostly a blur, flashes of gray, the dull ache in my chest, the endless tripping over roots and rocks. No matter where I ran, the voice followed, sometimes echoing from behind, sometimes from somewhere ahead. The fog never thinned. Sometime long after midnight, I stumbled onto the hard stones of a gravel bar beside the river. This patch of earth felt more real, the current wild and black compared to the formless sea I'd been lost in. I collapsed as sound slowly returned, first the burble of water, then a distant call of a raven. I lay there, half in water, half on land, shivering so badly I could barely think. By dawn, the air had cleared. The fog was thin, the world sunlit, empty, but strangely welcoming. I forced myself upright, staggered downstream, and several hours later, stumbled into the path of two rangers repairing an old trap. When I tried to explain, their faces stiffened. They just agreed. Sometimes the valley plays tricks. Not everyone makes it out. One of them squeezed my shoulder a little too hard, as if to reassure himself I was really there. Back at civilization, my tent was shredded along the base with marks like claws or sharpened wood. My boots were soaked, and the compass had turned to a useless piece of melted metal. Logic failed me. Every bone ached to go home and never remember what happened. But I can't shake those breaths, those whispers, or the sense that something follows me on foggy nights. They call it Headless Valley for a reason. The legends warn about things that hunt in the mist. And now I'm afraid that part of me will always be lost to whatever else is hidden in its shadows. If you ever find yourself alone in the Headless Valley, don't trust the silence or the fog. And if you hear your own name whispered from the mist, run, because not everyone gets the chance. What if your own echo began whispering secrets you never told a soul, changing words, chilling you with knowledge deeper than sound? Imagine being stranded in the Rockies, only to realize the true horror is that the mountain itself is listening, and it never forgets. My name is Kai, and I'll never step foot near Headless Valley again, no matter how many awards they offer or promises of glory they make. People think the Rockies are just stone and silence, endless ridges where the only thing dangerous is a slip or a storm. But after what happened last autumn, I know there's something older here, something vast and aware, pretending indifference, waiting for the right person to get lost before revealing its true voice. The way it began was almost ordinary. I was hired as an assistant sound engineer for a wilderness documentary about the myths of Headless Valley, those wild tales of vanished trappers and bodies with their heads gone, found half buried by the river's edge. Our team was lean, just me, a cameraman named Silva, our field guide, and the ambitious director, who was convinced we'd get viral views by capturing the real mood of the valley. My job was to plant recorders, chase echoes, and prove nothing supernatural lived here, just wind and water. From the outset, things felt off. Every step into the woods brought a scraping silence, like anticipation just before a storm. The sunlight had a coppery tinge, leaching warmth from the world and painting everything in ambiguous half-light. We set up camp along a ridge called Whisper Point, a local spot legend said was haunted by the voices of the vanished. Our first task was simple: record a series of natural echoes near the cliffs. I clapped, shouted, and even laughed just to fill the void with noise and test the responsiveness of the canyons. "What would you do if your echo started talking back?" Silva joked. The director rolled her eyes, but I noticed she never laughed. The first 10 recordings. Nothing. Clean, repetitive, exactly as sound waves bouncing off granite should be. Hello, low, low, low. That changed at sunset. I called my own name, Kai, over a shallow ravine. The echo returned, delayed but different. My voice, but with a strange inflection. Kai. Why? "Did you hear that?" I asked. Silva barely looked up from the camera. "Just an illusion. Stones do weird things." But I felt a knife-edge shiver slice through me. We moved up the ridge, past wind-battered pines. The field guide, a taciturn local named Esther, paused and sniffed the air. "We shouldn't linger," she muttered. "This place remembers." The director wanted just a few more takes. I laid the boom mic down and made another call. "Is anyone there?" My voice came back, but so did something else, barely beneath it. A warped echo of a language that didn't belong. A wet click, a hush, almost like a faint chuckle. The mountain was getting dark, and so was my mood. That night, bundled in my sleeping bag against early frost, I played back the day's recordings on my headphones. Static, wind, and then a voice nested under my own, whispering my childhood nickname, a name I hadn't used in 15 years and never once in front of the crew. I froze, skin prickling, breath held. The guide's tent rustled, as if she dreamed fitfully. I replayed the segment. There it was, my nickname, clear as water. Rational thought warred with fear, maybe the wind, or a coincidence, but the cadence was too careful, too intimate. In the small window of cell service on one ridge, I messaged my little brother half a continent away. "Weird question. Have you ever told anyone your old pet name for me?" He replied instantly, "No. Why?" I didn't answer. I didn't sleep. The next morning, things spiraled. I felt like the land itself had turned voyeur. Every sound was suspicious. While hiking to our next location, I absent-mindedly hummed a tune I'd only ever sung as a kid, nervous, habitual. As I crossed a narrow ledge, I heard it echoed back, but the voice was wrong. Not my own, off-key and older, like someone else trying to taunt me. Even the wind around me seemed to carry casual barbs, mocking, insisting, repeating details of my life. At camp, Silva played a prank, hurling rocks into a deep crevasse so they'd clatter forever. He did it 3 times, and every time I heard the same echoing call. Kai, come back." The director rolled her eyes and said we were getting jumpy. Esther refused to stay alone, muttering prayers in a language none of us understood. Our last night near Whisper Point, the air felt like wet wool. Static built up in my skin, every hair prickling. I woke from a dream of drowning, sweat cold despite the chill. From the ravine, in the direction of the cliffs, a chorus of whispers rose. 1,000 voices repeating sentences from my own recorded notes, merging into a monstrous imitation of me. I grabbed the recorder and bolted from the tent, adrenaline pounding out logic. The trees parted, dim moonlight painting the world silver and raw. The echoes seemed to follow as I crashed down the crumbling path, stumbling over roots and shale. At the edge of the cliff, my own voice, clear, desperate, called out from the blackness below. "Kai, why did you come here?" It was not a question, it was an accusation. I closed my eyes. The presence in the voices became overwhelming. My childhood regrets, old embarrassments, promises broken, failures, secrets no one could have known but me. The rocks below seemed to breathe with the collected memory of everyone who'd passed through. Everyone the mountains had stripped raw. Behind me, I sensed movement. Silva and Esther had followed, faces drawn as if they'd aged years overnight. Esther held a tiny talisman of white bone and rough twine. She stood beside me, grounded, not speaking. Silva's usual smirk was gone. The echo began to wind. Around us, hissing names, events, shames, each private, each a dart aimed at the soul. "We go now," Esther said, voice stronger than I expected. She tugged my sleeve, pressing the charm into my palm. "Leave it here. It will keep them busy." She pressed me back toward camp, muttering urgently in her own tongue. I left the charm at the cliff's edge, my hand shaking with something like relief, and we retreated in silence, broken only by Silva's muttered curses and the wind's relentless repeating. By dawn, the echoes faded to normal. Just rock, just wind, just us. We packed and hiked down the valley, each step easier, as if we'd been granted safe passage. For the rest of the trip, no one dared mention what happened. Our recordings afterwards were silent, eerily empty except for world's most regular echoes. When I came home, I tried to analyze the recorded audio, look for technical explanations, digital artifacts, fragments of overlapping frequencies. But nothing could explain how the whisper broke the laws of physics, especially when, on one final listen, I heard the echo thank me in my brother's childhood voice. Nothing could make me erase those files either. I keep them, unplayed, locked away, like a warning from the deep mountains. If you ever travel Whisper Point, remember, the Rockies are alive with more than wind and water. They listen, they remember, and sometimes they answer. What would you do if the moment you stepped into a cave, the darkness pressed against you like a living thing, and when you tried to leave, voices hissed from where no creature should dwell? Imagine plunging beneath the Appalachian Mountains in search of secrets, only to discover the dark is already spoken for. People have always warned about caves in the Appalachians, how they swallow sound, scramble direction, and sometimes refuse to let you go. My name is Eden, and I learned that warning is more than superstition. It's a survival rule. I've spent my life under mountains, mapping unexplored caves, tracing limestone veins, always chasing the thrill that only comes with the unknown. In 2022, I joined a team of speleologists aiming to chart a newly discovered cave network beneath the oldest part of the range, just 20 miles off the nearest highway, but a world apart from safety. Our goal was simple: find new blind creatures, collect mineral samples, and put our names on the map. I was the youngest, invincible in that way only a 22-year-old can be. We'd heard rumors, odd drumming from deep underground, explorers vanishing, chambers that ate light. Half the locals claimed it had tunnels that went deeper than physics really allows, but we passed that off as locals exaggerating to scare outsiders. The only thing on our minds was a canyon mouth, choked with brambles, marked on no map, gaping with a darkness that felt colder than the air outside. That first hour was glorious. Our lamps carved golden paths through cathedral-sized caverns. The rock walls dripped with jewels and ancient bones, and the silence seemed comforting, a gentle hush beneath the roar of the world. In the main chamber, stalactites dipped like teeth, and bats hung in clusters, fluttering only when the air shifted. The cave descended, spiraling tight. We rappelled down ledges, left tape trails, mapped every passage on our tablets. The air got heavier, oppressive, loaded with hints of decaying moss. My senior partner, Dr. Casey, was a legend, bold and meticulous. I followed every instruction, securing lines, tracking supplies, double-checking oxygen monitors. But after our break, things changed. We split into pairs to cover more ground. My teammate Iris was quiet as usual. We took the leftmost tunnel, one rumored to lead to a chamber called the Cathedral by old spelunkers. The descent was steeper, our boots clanging against hard stone. Past the fifth turn, the cave became a narrow throat. The walls almost touched our shoulders, the air thicker and bitter. That's when the first voice came. Iris froze. "Did you hear that?" I shook my head, thinking she was jumpy. A minute later, the unmistakable sound reached us, soft scratching, as if something small scuttled along the wall, followed by a low whisper, the kind that makes your blood run heavy. It sounded like a word, elongated out of shape, almost like one of our names, or an echo warped to something inhuman. We flashed our headlamps at the walls, searching for the source. The beams seemed swallowed, fading inches from their birth. I called out, "Who's there?" And our voices bounced, not as pure echoes, but as warped guttural words we didn't recognize. Iris wanted to go back, but I insisted. "We're close to mapping the big chamber. Just a few more yards." The cave narrowed again, our trail almost gone. The air thinned and grew cold, like a breath from a freezer. That's when the scratching grew louder, rhythmic, deliberate. A shape darted through the beam, maybe a rat, maybe something else. We reached a split. The passage forked, one branch wide, the other wound tight as a snake's burrow. I felt a compulsion, something telling me, take the narrow way. Iris balked, but my curiosity overruled caution. We squeezed in, crawling until knees and elbows almost bled. The rock pressed in, sharp, wet, ancient. That's when all sound ceased. Iris called my name, but it vanished instantly in the velvet dark. I stopped, heart pounding, sensing someone or something in front of me. My lamp flickered, batteries perfect, but light flickered regardless. The passage twisted, and for a moment opened to a small chamber. There, illuminated in cold blue, bones, whole human skeletons, lay arranged in perfect geometric patterns. Circles, triangles, something almost ritualistic. Some bones were old, some looked newer. Iris gasped, her voice now brittle as glass. We tried to retreat, but the passage behind us had changed, narrower, strangling, the path unfamiliar despite our careful mapping. The scratching reappeared, now unmistakably a series of taps and slithers, growing into a chorus of unnatural movement. I yelled for Casey, for the others, but the cave gave nothing back except strangled mockeries of our own cries. Then, out of the dark, dozens of pinprick eyes reflected in the lamp's feeble light. They darted, too quick for comfort. "Rats," I whispered, hoping to mask fear with logic. But rats don't have round silver eyes. Rats don't move in organized lines toward intruders. My lamp flashed, and with it came the realization they were crawling upwards, towards the bones, towards us. I pushed Iris back, desperate to find a way out. The creatures hissed. Not animal, but something else entirely. Their bodies were long-limbed, flesh too pale, forms both human and not quite human. Iris sobbed, clutching my arm. As the horde closed in, one crawled onto my boot, breathing air that smelled like copper and rot. "Run," I hissed. "Run now." We scrambled, clawing at the stone, ignoring every instinct about preserving oxygen, just trying to survive. The cave responded by stealing our path, every twist and turn new. Scratching became drumming, a beat like 1,000 insects dancing on hollow bones. My lungs burned. The world collapsed into terror. As we reached the junction, I saw Casey, her lamp brighter, her eyes wild. "Get out. Now," she screamed, hauling us down a passage she'd found while searching frantically for the missing pair. We dashed forward, Behind us, the chorus peaked into a shriek, a sound that echoed both fury and hunger. I didn't look back. I couldn't. We burst out into the main chamber, light streaming from above, fresher air mixing with the stench of decay. The team was there, 3 others, pale with fear, but alive. "Did you see them?" Casey asked, voice trembling. All we could do was nod. We didn't talk much as we climbed out. I felt those eyes on me. The patterns on the bones burned into my memory. We returned to camp, barely speaking. Back at base, we reviewed our footage. Everything after entering the narrow tunnel was corrupted. Audio warped to a static hiss, visuals overexposed to white, punctured by flashes of silent movement. Casey filed a report. The cave network was sealed. Local authorities posted "Do not enter" signs and the mouth barricaded. I've spent 2 years trying to convince myself what happened in those caves of the Appalachians was just fear, shadows, stress. But late some nights, when the wind rises and the world is both alive and silent, I hear scratching at the windows. Sometimes, in nightmares, I see those silver eyes blinking from the walls. And the voice calls out, close, almost familiar. "Eden." If you ever think of exploring forbidden caves, remember that darkness is not empty, and silence is never alone. Some places are mapped for a reason, so we know where not to go. What would you do if the blinding roar of an avalanche left you buried, trapped, and hearing voices that called out your deepest regrets from the darkness? Imagine struggling under tons of snow in the Alps, only to realize you are not alone beneath the ice. My name is Adrian. I'd always believed the worst a mountain could do was bury you alive in snow or leave you writhing on a broken leg, begging the wind for mercy. What happened to me on the north face of the Bernese Alps proved that some mountains don't just trap your body. They play with your mind, peeling you open until all your fears and secrets hang in the cold air. I wasn't new to risk. I'd spent years as a mountain guide and search and rescue medic, the kind who handles lost hikers, vertical rescues, and blizzard evacuations without blinking. In the late winter of 2023, I was asked to join a small, elite rescue team for a high-profile mission. 3 climbers stranded after a freak avalanche. They'd signaled their last known location, but then everything went silent. The area, locals whispered, sometimes 8 people, but rescuers don't listen to folklore when time is life. We began our ascent at dawn, 6 of us roped together, our packs bristling with radios, flares, medkits, and avalanche sensors. The first mile was routine, powder crunching beneath our boots, clouds hanging low but harmless. Our lead, Victor, radioed base every few minutes, relaying stats and GPS coordinates. My job was to monitor vital signs and manage trauma if luck ran out. The initial climb was almost beautiful. Icicles glinting, sunlight painting blue ghosts on the ridgelines, wind lashing tiny crystals against our faces. Soon we crested a narrow pass, ominous, but still manageable. Our avalanche gear pinged faint signals from somewhere below. We set to work, probing the snow with rods as deep as they would go, radios crackling with static. It was my job to dig, carefully, methodically, hoping for a weak call or a movement from beneath. The snow here had a strange texture, almost oily, sliding under my hands in sheets rather than clumps. Victor called out strange readings on the sensors. Multiple signals, maybe interference. I ignored the chill crawling up my spine. Then our radios flickered. The air went quiet except for the avalanche sensors, which now beeped irregularly, a warning we'd learned to fear. My shovel caught on hard ice, and, with a groan, the snow around us began moving. The avalanche erupted without warning. The world roared, visibility disappeared, and the ground beneath me collapsed into a belly of hard-packed snow. There was no time to run. 1 second I was with the team. The next I was falling, tumbling, suffocating under endless tons of powder. Darkness rushing in. When the world stopped, I found myself buried. My body was locked in a cold cocoon, arms and legs immobilized. It took me a moment to realize I was inverted, head tilted at an unnatural angle, vision gone black. My breathing was shallow, every gasp condensed to sweet ice crystals. I focused on survival, finding an air pocket, keeping calm, listening for sounds of rescue. Instead, I heard voices. At first, I assumed hypoxia, a known risk, hallucinations. But these voices weren't my own thoughts echoing inside my head. They were distant, distorted, layered over the hush of snow, speaking in languages I half knew. There was a woman's voice, soft, urgent, asking if I regretted what I'd done on June 14th, 2018, the day I lost my brother in a climbing accident. There was a guttural whisper repeating the phrase, "You never called. You left them." Then laughter, mocking, sharp, echoing in impossible directions. I tried to move, calling for Victor, for anyone. The snow muffled my shouts, eating sound before it could escape. My radio was crushed, only spitting static. I remembered mountain survival training. Stay calm, conserve energy, focus on hope. But the avalanche seemed to close in tighter. The voices persisted, cycling through memories and regrets, personal ones, things no one else could know. The darkness deepened. I saw visions. My brother's face frozen in terror, the moment I broke the news to my mother, the faces of other victims lost on missions. I felt time warping, minutes stretching into eternity, as if the past and present had merged in this icy tomb. Then, from somewhere nearby, I heard breathing. Not mine, heavier, labored, mixed with a clicking sound. I strained to pinpoint its location, convinced someone else was buried with me. "Over here," I rasped, barely a whisper through frozen lips. The breathing responded, matching my cadence, as if mocking survival instinct. A hand brushed against my arm, slow and deliberate. I tried to jerk away, but the snow would not allow it. The hand squeezed, icy cold, the grip stronger than any human I'd known. "Do you regret?" the voice asked again, right in my ear now. I tried to scream, but the avalanche pressed in, mouth filled with powder. I flashed back to my brother's last moment, staring up at the mountain. The woman's voice, his voice, whispered, "He waited for you." Panic overwhelmed me. I fought hard, clawing at the snow, desperate to move, but each struggle seemed to dig me deeper. Then suddenly, a cascade of warmer air rushed past, a crack of light, a shout. Shadowy figures appeared above, ropes descending, hands reaching. I gasped, real or imagined, I didn't care. Suddenly the pressure lifted. The rescuers grabbed my shoulders, hoisted me out, stomping the snow to create space. Victor knelt beside me, shout muttering, "You're all right, just breathe. Stay with me." I heard the other team members rallying, pulling gear, organizing survivors. Once safe, I collapsed into the snow, shaking uncontrollably. I stared at the faces of my rescuers and could not speak. Not yet. All the voices had left me, but in their wake was an emptiness, an ache, deep in my chest. We regrouped at a makeshift base. Of the original missing climbers, 2 were alive. The third found dead an hour later, frozen, eyes open, mouth contorted into a silent scream. When I asked the survivors what they'd heard while trapped, they fell silent, glancing at each other with haunted smiles. Later, one approached me quietly. "The voices," she said, refusing to meet my eyes. I heard them too. They were not ours. She described knowing things only her mother should share. Secrets, regrets, confessions. Another survivor nodded, confirming similar experiences. The mountains, it seemed, had a way of forcing truth in moments of absolute helplessness. As the hours passed, I lay in my tent, unable to sleep. Every now and then, a wind would howl, mimicking the avalanche's roar. I'd shiver, recalling the grip of that icy hand and the voices buried in the snow. I realized that every climber must face their ghosts alone. Sometimes the mountain becomes the confession booth, the crucible, the judge. We returned to base camp days later, shell-shocked but alive. I never spoke of the voices on the record, never wrote them in my report, but I know what happened. I know the mountain doesn't just test your skills, it tests your soul. Months passed. Occasionally, the survivors from that mission would reach out. None of us wanted to climb the North Face again. Some changed careers, some moved countries. One lost herself in silence. And me, I still feel the weight of that avalanche on quiet nights, the whisper of regrets unfinished, the sensation that deep snow can hold things older than memory. Sometimes, when I close my eyes, I hear that question repeating, do you regret? If you ever find yourself buried by the world, listen carefully. Sometimes, the voices in the dark have something important to say, but they may never let you go. Where are you watching from, and what time is it there? Let me know in the comments, and subscribe to Haunted Fears for more true accounts. Names and details are always altered for privacy, but these stories, they're chillingly real. What would you do if the rumble of an avalanche didn't just bury you alive? It trapped you in pure darkness, whispering voices calling your deepest secrets by name. Imagine fighting for breath beneath frozen tons of snow in the Alps, realizing you're not the only one buried, and not all the voices in the cold are human. My name is Adrian. I've always trusted the mountain more than people. The mountain is honest, it gives and takes openly, and its dangers, falling ice, sudden storms, fractured ridges, are as real as your own heartbeat. As a seasoned mountaineer and paramedic, I climbed the Bernese Alps, believing the worst was injury or death by avalanche, not terror in the dark. In late February 2024, with the world locked tight in ice, I was called for what should have been routine: rescue the 3 missing climbers supposedly trapped somewhere in the notorious Eiger North Face after a sudden slide. Our team was superb. Victor, my old friend, team leader, Andre, Timo, Lisa, and myself, all of us veterans of bitter climbs and near misses. Still, the locals were nervous, muttering about screaming snow and the fact that rescue teams sometimes bring back strange stories. We loaded up: radios, avalanche sensors, ropes, trauma kits. We started at dawn. The snow was hard as stone, keen wind biting at our cheeks, sky cloudless but heavy. Victor checked coordinates. Should find transponder signals north of the second crossing. I led the way, breathing rhythmically, eyes scanning ahead. The Alps in the early morning are beautiful in that threatening, God-sized way, cliffs rearing overhead like ancient bones. Near the summit pass, we registered faint signals. Too many, it seemed. Unusual echoes, Lisa mused. No matter. When a life might be saved, unusual becomes routine. We split into 2 groups, Andre with Victor, Lisa, and Timo alongside me. The snow underfoot felt odd, loose, as if something pulsed beneath. As we probed the crust, the avalanche fell. It was soundless at first, then the earth roared, sweeping us into a world of swirling, suffocating ice. One wrong footing, then sliding sideways, and suddenly gravity lapsed. All control vanished. When I hit, everything went black. I woke confused, unable to move. My arms trapped above me, legs twisted, helmet jammed painfully into frozen snow. The world was silent except for my heartbeat. I counted seconds, checked for pain, and, miracle, I felt none except a piercing cold in both feet. I tried to wiggle my fingers, then shouted for the team, snow devour sound. Still, I tried. Help! Victor! That's when the voices began. At first, I thought it was auditory hallucination, caused by panic or lack of oxygen. But then, the voice spoke my name, my full name, not the one my teammates used. Adrian Matthias, do you regret? It sounded like my mother's voice, but she died years ago. It came from everywhere, nowhere, layered into every icy crevice. The air vibrated with memories. I saw old failures, the climbing accident that took my brother Julian, the frightened look in my father's eyes the next morning, the secrets I carried. The voice changed now, younger, asking, "Why did you let go?" I tried to answer, sobbing, tears freezing on my face. The snow pressed in. At one point, something moved a few centimeters from my gloved hand. I couldn't see, but I felt a presence. Cold breath, clicking teeth. I froze, praying for rescue, for an explanation other than madness. Victor's voice came faintly, but the mountain warped it. "Stay awake, Adrian, we're coming." I tried to answer, fighting the urge to sleep, but instead the snow groaned, the voice whispering deeper truths. "How many have you saved? How many lost?" I saw faces, victims, lovers, regrets filling the tunnel of snow. After what felt like hours, fighting panic and despair, something miraculous happened. A beam of faint light, then hands, then shouted orders. I was pulled out of the snow cocoon, gasping, blinking into a world exploding in color and noise. Lisa wrapped her heater blanket around me. Victor checked my pulse. Andre offered water. I could barely speak. We found the missing climbers hours later, one dead, his frozen face twisted in horror, eyes wide. The living, too, were in shock. I asked them what they'd felt. One shuddered. "I heard my grandmother calling me. I never told you I left her alone that night." The other simply said, "The mountain wanted me to confess." Back at the base, we sat like survivors. No one really talked about voices, but I saw haunted eyes, twitching hands, silences loaded with meaning. That avalanche took more than physical strength. It forced every one of us to face our worst truth. I left the Alps soon after, changed. At night, sometimes, I feel cold breath whispering secrets I hope no one else ever hears. I changed careers, stopped leading mountain climbs for strangers, stayed close to sea level. But the question that avalanche asked me, "Do you regret?" never leaves. And I wonder if every mountaineer in every frozen grave hears that alone. Have you ever stood on a mountain, feeling like the storm overhead was somehow watching you, replaying tragedies from a forgotten past? Some believe the weather remembers what blood was spilled. What if the sky itself refused to let you leave? I'm Margaret, and I've climbed mountains all over the world, but the Himalayas taught me that sometimes it's not just the ground or the air you have to fear. It's the way the very sky itself shapes your fate. The year I turned 31, I joined a small expedition to summit an obscure peak just north of the Annapurna Range, known as Chandra's Spine. The place was infamous not for altitude or technical danger, but for freak storms that seemed to echo centuries-old disasters. My climbing partner, Emmett, was a historian by trade, obsessed with old expedition journals and whispered curses. Before we left, he showed me an ancient map mottled with red, tiny drops marking where, allegedly, climbers from long ago vanished in impossible tempests. I rolled my eyes but humored him. We packed spiked boots, down jackets, portable weather sensors, and Emmett's battered journal collection. Our trek started with a sense of adventure but quickly felt like trespassing. Villagers at the last settlement said the wind up high speaks with a dead man's tongue. An old woman handed me a talisman woven of mountain grass, muttering that it would keep the sky from seeing you. Emmett scoffed, but later I caught him stashing it in his jacket. For the first 3 days, the weather was gentle, a rare blessing in the high Himalayas. We climbed through rhododendron forests, then up wilder slopes, camping each night in pockets of moonlit stillness. I found Emmett scribbling notes beside our fire, always looking up as if expecting clouds to descend. On the 4th morning, an unnatural hush enveloped us. The usual birdsong was gone, replaced by a wind that seemed to spin in circles, carrying with it the faint taste of metal. Our weather sensors crackled and went blank. No temperature, no barometric reading, as if the sky refused to be measured. Emmett frowned. "This happened in 1893, he muttered. "Same pattern. The journal says the air freezes, then repeats." By noon, clouds swirled in hypnotic patterns. Lighting flashed, not from the sky, but somewhere within the storm itself. tracing the same jagged line every few minutes, like thunder rehearsing a performance. Rain hammered the rock, then stopped. Then, 10 heartbeats later, it hammered again. Always the same rhythm. We pressed higher, nerves taut. Each time we reached a ridge, wind struck in the exact same fashion, gusting from the east, dying, then returning. I joked it was a weather version of Groundhog Day. Emmett didn't laugh. This has all happened here before. The journals match, names, dates lining up. It's like the mountains caught in a loop. We set camp under a jagged spur that evening, unsure if we should press on. I lay awake, counting the thunderclaps. 9 in a row, always spaced exactly the same, then silence. I began timing them, heart skipping every time the sequence repeated, perfectly. The sky above felt huge, aware, hostile. Just past midnight, our tent shook violently. Emmett bolted up, wild-eyed, the journal opened to a yellowed page. "Listen to this," he hissed. 1893, July 2nd. A storm came at 2 a.m., hammered in cycles, chased us down the spine. We lost Carter to lightning after the 9th strike. Then the rain began again, just like before, like it was remembering what happened. The wind outside howled, echoing the words. We debated what to do. Mountains breed uncertain courage. Emmett wanted to retrace our steps, but something in me, some stubborn edge, insisted we could outlast the weather. We pressed on in the morning, hunched against the wind. Our breath came in ragged bursts, and the barometer flickered back to life, only to show the same reading, hour after hour, as if trapped in time. That day, the storm broke for real. Fog raced up the slopes, lashing at our faces. Static crackled in my hair, raising it straight up despite the rain. Lightning slammed the mountain, always in the same spot as Emmett had written, so precisely timed it felt like ritual. The ground shuddered. Rocks groaned and split. My fear turned to awe, then terror. As dusk fell, Emmett knelt in the mud, shivering, pointing to a cairn, a stack of old stones half lost to the weather. That's where Carter died. That's where it always happens. We circled the spot, unnerved, trying not to linger. The wind whipped, but deep inside I sensed the mountain, waiting, hungrily. We camped in a hollow, praying for dawn. Instead, night brought another repetition. Thunder, rain in sequence, the air itself curdling to ice. I began hallucinating, visions of old climbers, their faces twisted, hands raised to curse the sky. I saw Emmett, but he looked like a shadow of himself, lips moving. I heard voices in the wind. They said nothing I understood, but every word burrowed inside me. By the 6th cycle, Emmett broke. He ran into the storm, screaming at the mountain to stop. Lightning flashed, stabbing the same place as every other time. I begged him to return. My radio was dead. The tent flapped madly, tearing to shreds. I staggered after him, boots sinking in mud. I saw his silhouette against a jagged boulder, his arms in the air, challenging fate. The next moment, a blast of air knocked me down. When I scrambled to my feet, Emmett was gone. Hours passed. The storm cycled again, always the same. My terror dissolved into numbness, then a broken resolve. I was alone on the mountain, sitting by a cairn that marked a death from decades ago, feeling the sky ask me if I'd leave anything behind, if my story would be remembered, or just replayed. Morning brought a sick light. The weather cleared, silence so complete it felt holy. There on the stones, I saw Emmett's battered journal, open to a page reading, "If the mountain remembers, so will I." I realized that some storms aren't just accidental. They're reenactments, ancient traumas replayed for any wanderer who dares climb too high. I staggered back down, half mad from fear and loss, guided by the old woman's talisman, and a hope that the cycle would break for me. As I reached the village, the clouds closed in again behind me, slate gray and restless. I spent weeks recovering, haunted by the endless repetition of the sky, the precision of the weather, the hungry way the mountain asked for remembrance. Sometimes I wake at midnight, counting thunderclaps, waiting for a cycle to complete, and wondering if somewhere, up on Chandra's spine, another climber is facing the exact same storm. If you ever feel the weather repeating itself, trust your gut. Some storms remember, and they never forgive. Have you ever felt a place watching you, as if the past is refusing to die? Some places in the mountains are haunted, not just by ghosts, but by the echo of lives cut short and towns that refuse to let go. My name is Gabriella, and my obsession with photographing abandoned places nearly killed me last spring in the Rockies. Most people who seek haunted sites want chills and stories, maybe some dust and a blurry shape in the background. Not me. For me, every broken window, every splintered board is a remnant of lost dreams. I collect them in film and pixels, but nothing in my life had ever felt truly dangerous until I visited the mining town of Gallows Rest. Gallows Rest is not on most maps, tucked deep in an offshoot valley carved by the ferocious Bearclaw River. In the late 19th century, the town thrived on silver. By 1911, reserves ran dry, winter starved out the population, and a fire destroyed the last working mine. People left fast and never looked back, murmuring about cursed ground. What remains are a handful of buildings slouching into the brush, a few blackened signs, and a church steeple that still somehow pierces the sky. I'd read about Gallows Rest in a faded blog post, complete with a grainy shot of the church at dusk and rumors of lanterns moving inside at night. My fixer, Ben, was hesitant, but agreed to guide me up the cracked forestry road. My mission was part art project, part urban legend hunt, capture the real soul of a place the modern world tried to erase. We arrived in the late afternoon after fighting ruts and switchbacks that nearly killed Ben's truck twice. The air was clean, yet tinged by something old, the sour smell of coal dust, rust, and wet wood. The silence hit first, thick as syrup. A silence so complete it made every shoe squeak, every zipper, every camera click boom through the emptiness. We started at the outskirts where homes rotted slowly, porch swings dangling as if someone had just left and would return any second. Ben made nervous jokes, but kept glancing over his shoulder. My camera's lens fogged when I tried to capture the main street as the sun dipped behind the ridge. The cold arrived fast and sharp. I suggested we scout the old town hall before it got dark. Inside the hall was a tomb. Broken chairs, arranged in crooked lines, tattered flags, a ledge holding a cracked portrait of some long-ago mayor. I wandered, snapping photos, lost in a trance until Ben hissed for me to hurry up, said he felt watched. I rolled my eyes but hurried along. In places like these, nerves are contagious. As twilight thickened, I begged Ben to let me get a few shots of the church. The building looked solid at a distance, but shingles peeled, and the pale doors listed inward. Through the dust-caked glass, I saw an organ slumped in shadow, pews warped by time, candles reduced to shivering nubs. I posted up on the porch, steadying for a long exposure. The instant the shutter fired, a thin, shimmering light danced across the stained glass inside. I froze, thinking Ben had fired his flashlight, but he swore. Hands raised, he'd touched nothing. The glow flickered along the aisle and vanished behind the altar. I felt a chill coil up my legs, and I grinned. This is exactly what I came for. That's when the silence cracked. An organ note, one mournful, lingering chord, vibrating through the floorboards. Ben let out an expletive and scrambled back into the street. I held my breath, waiting to see if the sound would repeat. The town remained still, yet the air now felt denser, like water. We retreated to the truck, but I couldn't sleep. At midnight, I crept out with my camera, unable to shake the urge for one last shot. The world was silent, frost creeping across windows. As I raised the camera, faint lights flickered in the blacked-out buildings down the street. Lanterns moving behind boarded windows, shadows pacing in rhythm. My heart hammered. "Ben, wake up," I hissed, but he was out cold, back turned. I told myself to stop, leave the shots for morning, but the church glowed faintly, drawing me with a strange gravity. I stepped inside. The pews were empty, but each seemed to shudder as I moved past. I set my tripod and focused on the altar. That's when I saw her. A woman in a tattered dress, hair wild, skin pale as paper, holding a lantern that swayed in silence. Her eyes met mine, black and endless. I fumbled the camera, freezing under her stare. She raised her finger to her lips as if to silence me, then pointed up. I followed her gaze to the gallery above the sanctuary, where more lanterns, each carried by pale, insubstantial hands, swayed in the dark. The silence broke, everywhere at once. The organ wailed, lanterns flickered, and suddenly the church was filled with shadowy figures, faces distorted and blurred. They lined the aisles, their mouths open in screams I could not hear. The air turned ice cold, the smell of burning wood and iron choking me. I turned and ran. The doors slammed. The whole building trembled as feet pounded wooden floors, chasing or simply replaying an old, terrible panic. I shoved my way through, ripping a coat sleeve, tumbling into the street with lungs bursting. Ben was outside, tiles clattering at his feet, eyes wide with terror. He'd seen the lights too. "We have to go, now," he barked, gunning the engine until the truck skidded down the dirt track, headlights slashing the darkness behind us. The whole drive back, Gallows Rest glowed behind us like a ship on fire. Windows shining where no glass remained, shadows marching down the main street. I choked back tears, unable to say whether it was fear, adrenaline, or grief for people I'd never met. We said nothing until morning. When I checked my photos, every image after sunset was ruined. Black blurs, streaks of impossible light, warped human forms. Only one was clear. A shot of the church, door wide open, a faint woman's silhouette at the altar, hand to her lips, lantern raised. I sent the photo to a historian friend, who called within minutes, voice smaller than I'd ever heard it. That church burned in 1911. Survivors said they saw the souls of their loved ones marching with lanterns before the fire took them. That night, I sat in my apartment, the city noise feeling paper thin. I wondered if I'd captured sorrow, or just disturbed wounds that never healed. From that day forward, I deleted every image from Gallows Rest except that single church photo, which I keep tucked in a drawer, never shown, never copied. I warn other explorers now to stay away from abandoned mining towns, the places where the past hangs on with fingernails, clawing through rot and time. Some stories are burned into the bones of a place, waiting for anyone foolish or curious enough to walk alone after dark. Sometimes, when I look out my window in the early morning, I see the reflection of a lantern swaying gently in the glass. The city is wide awake, but the memory of Gallows Rest keeps watching, waiting. If you feel the urge to capture what's left behind, remember, not all ghosts want their story told. Sometimes they just want the town to sleep. You hear people talk about heroic rescue missions in the mountains, the ones where everyone comes home, bruised but alive. But what if the person you went to save warns you to turn back, saying, "The valley wants more, and now you've brought it what it needs"? My name is Walker. If there's one thing life as a volunteer mountain rescuer teaches you, it's that the most urgent emergency callouts come with no time to second guess. Before that spring, I thought I'd seen everything. Frostbite gone black, avalanches, panicked climbers clutching broken bones. I never believed I'd have to choose between saving someone and obeying a warning that nobody sane would ever deliver. The call came at twilight before my shift in late May. An overdue climber in the far northern Rockies, deep inside the same haunted expanse people called Headless Valley. The missing hiker, Micah, had last radioed for help just before a ferocious storm rolled in. He claimed he was lost above Timberwolf Pass, hearing voices, and glimpsing things that weren't right. The local SAR Captain Jude told us, "If anyone can get him out, it's your crew, but don't go off the main trail if you value your lives." There was no time for ghost stories. By 7 p.m., 6 of us, me, 2 younger volunteers, Jason, Lydia, Jude, and a medic named Dr. Rose, were bouncing up muddy switchbacks in our battered SUV. The dusk was weirdly still. The clouds sat waiting like bruises. We found Micah's truck crusted with mud at the old trailhead, his pack missing. I checked a posted map. The timberline was 5 miles ahead, then the notorious Devil's Elbow, a bend locals said animals wouldn't cross after dark. Cautioned but undeterred, we locked arms and set off. Our radios buzzed but only spat static. We trudged up past the tree line, boots sinking in slick thaw. Night crept in too soon, but our lamps pushed it back for a while. Lydia began murmuring prayers. Her family had been here before, lost an uncle in the 1980s. Jace, upbeat and optimistic, hummed old rock songs. I focused on the grit in my teeth and the metallic tang of snow. By midnight, sleet battered us sideways. We called for Micah at every marker, blowing whistles. For hours, no reply. Finally, at a ridge between 2 crooked pines, our beams caught a shape. Micah staggered out of the dark, looking gaunt, hair matted and eyes wild, hanging by a thread. Dr. Rose hustled to examine him, but Micah wouldn't stop talking. His words poured out, urgent, dead-eyed. "You shouldn't have come. No, you don't understand. You can't save everyone. It's not just me out here. The valley takes. Always more." Jude tried calming him, asking where he was hurt. "Micah, we're here to help. Talk to me." But he just gripped my sleeve, nails biting deep, and hissed, "You have to leave before it's too late, before it decides." I told myself it was just hypothermia, exhaustion, classic rescuer's battle, with a panicked patient. Dr. Rose gave him warm fluids, checked his vitals. But Micah flinched at every howling wind, wouldn't eat, wouldn't close his eyes. "It whispers my name. It's happy now. You brought more." Just what it needed. We managed to put him on a stretcher, climbing slowly down the now frozen path. But every time our headlamps flickered or damp clouds thickened, Micah shivered and screamed, "Don't let go! Don't lose sight of anyone. It picks one. It picks one when you're apart." A mile from the SUV, the wind changed, cold and weird as the inside of a freezer. Lydia tripped. Jace raced to help her. Jude and I glanced away for a single second. In that moment, Micah sprang from the stretcher, vanishing into the dark. He moved without pain, as if carried. Jace and I tore after him, crashing through brambles. We lost track, headlamps bouncing, night swallowing us whole. Lydia's radio pinged somewhere downslope, static interspersed with faint cries. "Come back, please," I shouted. There were shadows up ahead, strange shapes running parallel, never quite caught in the light. Was it Micah? Was it something else? My breath steamed. The woods twisted in a way that made no sense, as if the valley wanted us confused, branches shifting and trails never leading the same direction twice. The temperature kept dropping. My boots went numb. Jace nearly walked over a sheer drop. The wind groaned, and deep beneath it, a sound like slow breathing echoed. And always those voices, sometimes Micah's, sometimes someone older, someone hungry, calling us one by one. Jude's voice crackled over the radio. "Stop. Stop moving. It wants you to split. Stay together." But the dark pushed against us, every instinct in my body screaming to run. Just as Jace slipped out of sight, I caught his jacket sleeve, yanking him back. At the same time, something brushed close, cold as the grave, sharp as splintered wood. I swung my lamp. For a split second, a form, headless, antlered, limping, flashed between the trees. We regrouped, shivering, adrenaline blazing. Lydia was missing, her faint voice, a low melodic call, carried over the wind. We plunged after her, all of us together now, but the night chewed up distance. Each time we thought we caught up, there was only snow, the echo of a footstep, the print of a boot vanishing as we watched. Eventually, dawn crept in, pink and bruised. We found ourselves back at the Devil's Elbow, not sure how we'd gotten there. A place we'd passed only once, but now on the wrong side. Lydia appeared from the fog, unharmed, and smiling in a way I'll never forget. It wasn't her smile. She joined us, but her eyes never quite met ours. "Let's get Micah back," she mumbled, voice too flat. I swallowed hard. The SUV was cold but safe. We bundled in, heaters blasting. Micah sat silent, staring at his hands. Jace wept quietly. Jude tried the ignition and cursed. The battery was stone, dead. As the seconds ticked, the silence grew heavy, pressing down on my chest. A tap on the window, the shape of a man. One of the locals from the town below, come to check on missing hikers. "Storm's coming. Shouldn't stay up here," he said, face gray with worry. He handed us a jump pack, said nothing more, and walked away, disappearing into the morning. We got the SUV running, not daring to stop until we were 2 valleys away. By the time the adrenaline faded and the daylight showed cracks, Lydia fell asleep and woke up unable to remember the night. Jude drove in silence. Jace later left the crew, never to return. Micah was, well, alive, but changed. He barely spoke to anyone again. I sometimes dream of the path twisting under my boots, the wind clawing at my face, voices chanting my name. I wake in a cold sweat, remembering Micah's warning. "You didn't save me. Now it wants to keep you." There's a quiet moment after the wind in any woods, when everything feels watched. And in those moments, I never go out alone. If you're ever called to rescue someone from a place the locals refuse to near after dark, listen to them. Some places don't want to be left empty-handed, and you might bring just what they're waiting for. There's a unique terror in realizing the mountain is trapping you in time, when every step carries you back to where you started, and exhaustion is the only thing that changes. How long could you survive if every attempt to escape left you further from freedom and closer to losing your mind? My name is Cecilia, and after what happened to me on the flanks of Cerro del Espejo in the Argentine Andes, I can't stand the endless repetition of ordinary days. I wasn't searching for horror. I was chasing a record, an Alpine Ladies First, all-women's team ascent, a feat intended to be marked by triumph, not terror. Instead, my summit dream became a spectral nightmare of endless sunrises, collapsing sanity, and something old, watching us each time we stumbled past the same blasted cairn. We weren't climbing giants like Aconcagua this time, but Cerro del Espejo was notorious among locals for its plateaus that tricked the eyes, and a summit cairn that nobody could explain. My team was solid. Irina, who'd skied across Svalbard in a blizzard, Fiona, wild and witty, and Juniper, silent, stubborn, born in Patagonia. We mapped a route, prepared a cache in advance, and started up under clear blue skies, nerves humming with pride and possibility. The first 2 days felt perfect. Hard climbing, thin air, bruised shins, but no drama. Each night we laughed over freeze-dried pasta, told stories while the wind howled past the tents, and plotted the summit push. Irina filmed our progress for a documentary. Her jokes sometimes cut the tension, sometimes bounced back brittle and hollow. Summit morning, everything changed. The wind stopped, replaced by a weird silence. Juniper muttered about the old myths, how the mountain sometimes loops trekkers for its amusement. We all waved her off, used to local ghost tales. We packed water and bars, left the tent, and started the last climb. The ridge stretched on, lengthening with every step. My altimeter ticked higher than expected, as if somewhere in the mountain, gravity had slacked off and space stretched. After a brutal 3 hours, we stumbled over loose stones and found ourselves standing by a cairn of black rocks, painted with faded ribbons, our summit marker. The sky above glowed mercilessly bright. The world below spun in heat shimmers. We whooped, hugged, filmed the view, and started back to where camp should be. 30 minutes later, something felt off. Camp was nowhere. The mountain slope was wrong. Juniper, sure of her compass, grumbled about magnetic tricks. We pushed on round to where a crooked boulder marked a shortcut. It wasn't there. Fiona lost her temper, swearing at the cold, the thin air, us. Irina tried to calm her. I turned, intending to retrace the track, and realized every direction now presented the same slope, the same cairn, never out of sight, always just at the corner of vision. We all laughed nervously. "It's the altitude," I said. "Hallucinations. Low sugar." But unease crept in. Juniper laid down trail tape, bright pink, and we all dropped some belonging. An old glove, a gear strap, thinking we'd mark the escape. We headed down the western rib, certain it would curve toward our tents. After 2 silent hours, the sun barely shifting, we emerged into a clearing ringed by tumbled scree. In the center stood the cairn, pink tape fluttering from the stones giving us away. No way. We'd walked straight, cut angles, even scrambled over a landslide. Yet here we were, returned, and unrested. Irina cracked a joke. Maybe the mountain wants us for a little longer. We barely smiled. Fiona's wit shriveled, her eyes fever bright. Juniper spat on the rocks, muttering invectives in Mapuche. No trail, old or new, led anywhere but back. We tried sleeping. Maybe if we closed our eyes the spell would break. But sleep came in shreds and shudders. The ground buzzed with energy. I dreamt of shadows circling, peering down, gaunt women's faces whispering about standing still so the mountain can forget you. When I woke, Fiona was gone. Irina found her, wandering in circles, wild-eyed, convinced she could break the loop alone. That day, was it day, felt unending. We rationed water, ate the last of our food, discussed absurd plans, shouting for help, burning the cairn. Even as we argued, the mountains seemed to listen. Distant rocks fell, wind yowled through cracks. On the 4th, or was it the 10th, time we circled, Juniper fell to her knees by the cairn, whispering a prayer. To our shock, she started to laugh, then weep. "It's old," she barked. "It's hungry, it remembers. Maybe if we give it something to hold, it will forget us." Irina filmed, hands shaking. We gathered artifacts, photos, charms, letters from home, things holding meaning, and left them at the cairn, arranging them carefully. "This is everything I have left," Fiona murmured, her voice a shell. We tried again to leave, any direction, without turning, single file. But always the stones found us anew, hot or cold, sky clear or swirling. There was never an end. Days blended. We argued, cried, sang old nursery rhymes to kill the silence. One time we descended a gully, desperate, and the sun set utterly black. For an hour, maybe 2, then blinked back bright as morning, the cairn waiting. Our water ran out. I tasted blood on my tongue from thirst and sunburned lips. On what I believe was the 8th attempt, there was a noise, different this time. Wind stirring, rocks tumbling, and the faintest sound of laughter close at hand. Shadows snaked out from behind the cairn, slowly sharpening into dozens of silhouettes. Women in mottled summit coats, faces tired but unafraid. Some as clear as us, others fading at the edges. They beckoned, gestured to sit. "Be calm," their voices implied in silence. "The mountain forgets if you rest long enough." Juniper, exhausted, obeyed, collapsing onto the ground in a heap. Fiona made a sound between a laugh and a sob and joined her. Irina took out her camera, but the battery was long dead. I stood shaking, refusing to surrender. It was then I saw the oldest among them, a woman with weathered skin and a patchwork jacket that shimmered in the heat. She pointed past the cairn, beyond our camp, to a new trail I hadn't seen before, a break in the endless field of stone. I looked back at my friends, only Irina and I still standing. With nothing left to lose, Irina and I locked arms and walked toward the crack in the rocks. Each step felt slick and impossible, but the laughter receded, warmth filtered in, and the air felt lighter. The mountain resisted, 1,000 paws dragging us back, ancient memories clutching at our boots. But we moved faster, driven by fear and hope in equal measure. We slipped, fell, stumbled, thought we'd fall forever. Then, without warning, the ground gave way to the sloping face of the plateau, the ridge below us visible, tents glinting in the distant sunlight. I screamed for joy, pulling Irina with me. We scrambled down, collapsing in our camp, shaking, hollowed. We never saw Fiona and Juniper again. We left everything, gear, footage, pride, on the mountain. Locals listened to our story, nodding grimly. The mountain has moods, an old man told us. Sometimes it makes you pay for trespassing proudly. The cairn still stands, and I wonder who else has been greeted by the faded ribbons and the waiting faces, how many never left. Now, back home, I avoid circles, endless roads, and long corridors. I need each day to end, clear, final, marked by change. Sometimes, when I close my eyes, I hear distant laughter, dizzy in the wind, and remember the terror of being noticed, yet never allowed to go. If the mountain ever calls you to its summit, respect the cairn and remember, some circles aren't meant to be broken by force. Sometimes survival means waiting until the world changes for you. Some mountain horrors aren't supernatural, just terrifyingly real. Imagine setting up camp high on a frozen ridge, only to realize you're surrounded by predators whose eyes never move, never blink, and never vanish, no matter how long the night drags on. What if the wildlife watching you was unlike anything you'd ever seen or recorded? My name is Colton, and I used to believe that in the wild there are rules to survival, an understanding between man and beast about territory and fear. The Caucasus Mountains redefine those assumptions for me forever, and every time wind howls outside my window now, I remember the eyes that watched while I prayed for dawn. I was a wildlife filmmaker. My life's work had taken me to wolf dens in Alaska, leopard cliffs in Pakistan, and vulture nests in Spanish canyons. But in autumn 2020, I accepted a freelance job from a conservation group studying snowline predators in the Western Caucasus. Its pitch was irresistible. Spend 6 nights filming near the crest above Batizu Gorge, documenting wolf packs and rare Eurasian lynxes for a major documentary. The science team believed the area was crawling with elusive packs, the kind no one had tracked in decades. 3 of us made the climb. Me, my local fixer Anton, sly, quiet, built like a truck, and Katya, the grad student scientist who kept a database of every paw print and scuffle. We lugged equipment up the icy path. Infrared cameras, motion sensors, batteries, tents, and stacks of field notebooks. At sunset, Anton pointed out a cluster of half-buried boulders near the snow line for our camp. "Wolves wait here for winter," he said, his accent rough but clear. That first night, things felt electric. The sky flickered with northern lights, wind swept cold but invigorating. Katya set up camera traps. Anton showed me tracks. Wolf, fox, even bear. The freezing air felt clean, crisp, almost holy. I pitched my tent at the camp's edge and, tucked in my sleeping bag, drifted into a deep and hopeful sleep. The next day, Anton whistled me awake. Wolf prints everywhere, but something else. You see? He pointed to the perimeter, tracks larger than any Canis lupus, straddling normal wolf prints on the crusted snow. The gaps between the pads were wrong, wide, twisted. Katya shrugged it off. If you only ever expect wolves, you record only wolves. I snapped photos, set 3 infrared cameras at angles to capture anything approaching. The ridge felt perfect, sharpened by anticipation. By nightfall, everything changed. The wind picked up, mournful, carrying the scent of old bone and frost. Katya made quick sketches. Anton sharpened his knife. The moon rose, impossibly bright, splintering off the ice crystals along the ridge. Then, as our camp settled into uneasy silence, Anton whispered, "Don't look directly at the trees." He pointed across the field. There, between the birches and stone outcrops, eyes glowed red. Several pairs, so steady, so uncomfortably level. Not the scattered, erratic points of a wolf pack on the move. Just fixed, burning low, watching without blinking. Katya gasped, flashlight bouncing uselessly off the dark. I raised a thermal scope. The eyes didn't move. Not left, not right, not closer, not away. Anton picked up 2 stones and clacked them together, low and rhythmic. Wolves move, and they hunt. These, they wait, he said. We circled the camp, moving lights in shaky patterns. The eyes stayed, never evaporating, never dimming. Katya pulled out her tablet. No known animal should hold still this long. Wolves stalk, foxes pounce, bears bluff. She checked the camera feeds. The static was thick, grainy. In 2 frames from 3 cameras, trails of red dots lined the horizon like coals. Sleep was impossible. My heartbeat thundered. Anton sang an old hunter's prayer as he sharpened his knife and tucked it under his pillow. Katya scribbled and re-scribbled the wolves' supposed hunting territory, now as shaky lines. The silence swallowed even our whispers. I thought I saw patterns in the eyes. A ring, then a triangle, then a line arcing toward the east. At 2 a.m., Katya woke me, whispering violently. "Listen, the wolves, they're not moving. They're just watching." I crawled out of my tent, teeth chattering from cold and nerves, and focused my camera on the ridge. Every lens, every scope, revealed the same grid of eyes. No closer, no further. Just waiting, their color deepening to a pulsing orange. Anton placed a piece of raw meat at the edge of the camp on a slate of stone. Nothing happened. 1 hour, then 2. The eyes never blinked, never strayed, never blinked. I tried logic. Infrared showed bodies, but the heat signatures were dim, more like embers than living things. Katya muttered, "Wolves can barely hold a stare. Even big cats get bored." She tried radioing our field base 80 kilometers away. Static blared and cut off her calls. Anton refused to turn his back on the ridge or put away his knife. Near 3:45 a.m., I snapped a photo. The flash illuminated something behind the eyes, a row of shapes, humanoid, elongated skin, slick and pale, utterly silent but unmistakably upright. Dread rushed through me. Katya gasped. Anton mumbled, "Dead dogs, folktale from old men." Suddenly, the wind whipped harder, snow swirling up from nowhere. The temperature dropped to -20. I watched the eyes for any hint of emotion, hunger, curiosity, anything. They just waited. Anton murmured, "They watch until someone blinks." I locked my gaze, determined to match them. The moon arced overhead, my eyelids stung with cold. As the first hint of dawn colored the sky, the eyes receded into the woods, blinking out one by one, like candles snuffed by invisible hands. No footprints marked where they'd stood, only the deep chill in the snow and rows of perfectly circular holes, melted not by heat, but somehow by frost. We tried to convince ourselves we'd been mistaken, overwrought with altitude and fear, looking for the camera's artifact, not reality. But Anton shook his head, muttering about dead dogs, spirits in old Russian hunter tales, eyes waiting outside the camp until the last breath froze. The next day was worse. A blizzard trapped us for hours. The camera traps shorted out, memory cards fried from static. Katya grew withdrawn, her sketches filled with ringed eyes and implacable faces. Anton prayed louder, carving shapes into the snow with his knife. I watched the horizon. No wolves, no lynx, nothing. Only those eyes, waiting at twilight. Each night the red points returned, closing in, their patience grinding down hope. Katya suggested we retreat, but Anton refused. If we flee while they watch, they follow. On the 4th night, we discovered Anton's knife at the edge of camp, bent, twisted, covered in frost. He started to cough up blood, blaming the cold. Katya recorded everything. I couldn't sleep. My dreams circled scenes of red eyes trailing me down alpine passes. On the 5th night, something changed. Anton vanished just after midnight. His footprints ended half a meter from the camp's edge, swallowed into deep snow. Katya panicked, crying, "Too many eyes, too many. We're the prey now." I tried radioing, lighting flares. No help came. All I could do was film the ridge, the coals in the woods, the emptiness eating away at the edge of survival. The following dawn, Katya found a scrap of Anton's scarf stuck in a ring of melted snow holes. Her notes from that morning are barely legible, lines spiraling into circles. I packed up our gear, shivering. Katya had feverish shakes, talking to herself about being watched by the unmovable, judged for trespassing. The 6th night on the ridge was my last. Katya slipped into hypothermia. Tired, broken, I abandoned any hope of finishing the documentary, dragging her down the glacier to base camp as the eyes burned behind me, carried on the wind and in every frost-covered branch. When I finally looked back, the eyes disappeared into the forest as dawn touched the valley. We were rescued 2 days later, half alive. Anton was never found. Katya quit mountain science, moved to Istanbul, and never wrote again. I burned the footage, keeping only a single blurred photo. Red eyes in a perfect ring on the snow. Whenever someone tells you wolves are the scariest thing in the mountains, remind them that the wild waits, with eyes that neither blink nor move, holding court for as long as it wants. The stars themselves might not outlast such watchers. Not every warning in the mountains comes from human lips. Sometimes it's the wind itself, whispering your name when no living soul should know you. What if the only route to safety was across a haunted pass lined with the bones of the lost, and every whisper promised you'd be the next? My name is Jonah. Years ago, I believed every terrifying legend in the Karakoram Range was just a story guides told to frighten newbies. On that fateful spring trek, I learned some warnings are real, and some mountains want to speak, even when we desperately wish them silent. The Karakoram is brutal, unforgiving, and eerily beautiful. A maze of knife-edge ridges splitting the sky, with snowfields that shimmer blue in the dawn, and valleys that seem to fall forever into shadow. As an experienced trekker and freelance writer, I took pride in my rationality. I'd hiked the Baltoro Glacier, crossed Shigar, always skeptical, always making notes for articles that debunked the supernatural. Locals told tales of missing porters, travelers lured off paths by phantom voices, but I chalked it up to altitude and fatigue. That April, I was hired to document an expedition crossing the remote Lashkar Pass. This was not a climb for the faint of heart, high, avalanche-prone, a crossing feared by even the bravest Sherpas. Yet the real warning whispered at every roadside tea stall. If you hear your name after sundown, you must not answer. If you follow the wind, you'll never come back. Our group was tight. Ashraf, our irrepressible lead guide, Bashira and Imran, young porters both mountain-born, and 2 experienced local climbers, Raza and Malik. We started up the long approach, spirits high, with me keeping keen records, voice memos, endless snapshots, notating every minor superstition in my battered yellow journal. The weather was fitful, as it often is near the Siachen threshold. Sunlit mornings, cruelly cold afternoons, wind clawing white spindrift down every couloir. On the 3rd night, camped above the lower saddle, Imran quietly pointed out a rocky notch on the distant horizon dusted in skull-white bones. "That is the Whispering Pass," he said. "No one hurries there after dusk. Too many lost." Ashraf was openly dismissive, firing jokes at Bashira and Imran for their superstitions. "Passes don't talk, and dead men don't walk," he said. But in the hush after dinner, the wind's moan lifted, almost syllabic, like a half-remembered tune, or a voice caught between worlds. On day 6, we reached the base of Whispering Pass. It was gruesomely scenic. A narrow saddle between crags, littered with bones. Mostly yak and sheep, Ashraf said, but in the half-light, some seemed worryingly small for livestock. Every crossing, he reminded us, costs one more who doesn't listen to the warnings. We pressed on, timing our approach to hit the pass by midday. The wind grew stronger, tearing at our jackets, flattening the snow into perfect, coffin-shaped drifts. As we started up the exposed slope, I heard my name, clear as anything, whispered over the gusts. Jonah. I froze. Ashraf shouted over the gale for me to keep up, but the wind grew colder, sharp and persistent like fingers crawling along my ears. I ignored it, pressing forward between Ashraf and Bashira. For hours, the world shrank to boots and breath, the sound of wind, and that occasional, almost playful whisper. Jonah. Hurry. At first, I thought it was Ashraf's voice, pitched wrong by the wind. Later, it sounded like my mother, then my little brother gone these 10 years. Each time I fought the urge to respond, even as my heart pounded louder than the wind. Bashira was the first to look afraid. Don't go too close to the bones, she warned quietly. Sometimes they talk back. I tried to laugh, but every voice on the wind said my name, sometimes gently, sometimes pleading, sometimes angry. The hardest part was halfway up, where the trail narrowed and the cairns, piled stones marking lost travelers, stood thick along the edge. Each seemed almost freshly arranged. Raza murmured a prayer. Ashraf scoffed. Malik spat. I could barely look away from the nearest cairn, the bones bleached clean by sun and wind. That's when something changed. The wind's whisper became a chorus, blending into a high, keening song, as if every name ever lost in the past was being repeated at once. Imran stumbled, clutching his chest, and dropped to his knees. We crowded around, fearing a heart attack, but his lips only mouthed, "It's calling me." Raza and Malik pulled him back, dragging him to his feet, but he jerked and kicked, trying, desperately, to return to the cairns. He keeps hearing his mother, Bashira whispered, her own eyes wide. Suddenly, above the clouded ridge, the sky darkened. Snow swirled with renewed violence, pinning us to the ground with a force that felt deliberate. I counted the moments, measured my breaths, already imagining the next magazine piece about mountain fear. But those dreams shattered when I heard my brother's voice. Clear, strong, impossible. He'd been dead since I was 20. "Come home, Jonah," it whispered. "Why are you alone? Hurry before the others leave you." My steps faltered. I forced myself onward. Ashraf clapped me on the back, perhaps not realizing my terror. I tried to tell myself it was temporary. Oxygen deprivation, stress. But with each step, the path seemed longer. The bone piles, more numerous. Sometimes I glimpsed faces half buried in drifting snow, mouths open as if screaming silent warnings or curses. We lost Malik next. 1 second he was there. The next his footprints veered off, then stopped, the wind erasing them in a heartbeat. No sound, no shout, just his red scarf left on a jagged stone. The rest of us pressed together, shuffling in single file, ignoring the wind's beckoning. "Don't answer. Don't stop," Ashraf barked. "If you do, it gets inside your head." The final stretch was agony. Wind clawing at my skin, eyes watering, the pass narrowing to a blade's width. The bones formed a grotesque avenue, their hollow sockets gazing. The wind's song sharpened, the whispers pleading, cajoling, promising warmth or reunion, threatening to reveal secrets. In the midst of this, something passed in front of me. A shape, tall and robed in swirling ice, its mouth yawning with the darkness of a cavern. It hovered over the path, arms outstretched, and every bone marker shook in its presence. No other climber seemed to see. My vision narrowed. "Jonah," it intoned, "why won't you come home?" I bit my tongue, never answering, never meeting its gaze. Ashraf shouted, "Keep your eyes to the path, don't talk to it." Somehow, we reached the far side, tumbling down the scree in ragged silence, lungs burning, legs quaking like overstrung wires. The wind relented instantly, leaving the air so painfully still I could hear every frantic heartbeat. When I looked back, the pass was shrouded in writhing snow, the cairns barely visible, the ice figure gone. We lost two on that crossing, Malik, gone, and Imran, who never truly returned. He walked shell-shocked, refusing to eat, his eyes darting to shadows, listening for another call. Back at base camp, no one spoke for a full day. Ashraf left me with a single warning, his customary bravado drained dry. You write about this how you want, but let readers know. The wind has a memory, and mountains speak in voices you think you know. Some things aren't for answering. It's been 3 years since the past whispered my name, and I still wake in cold sweats hearing 100 voices on the wind. Parents, friends, enemies, lovers, each one luring me somewhere deeper, farther away from safety. I avoid hiking alone. I never walk at dusk near forests. Even now, when the wind rises, I keep my lips tight and try never to listen too closely. If you ever find yourself on a haunted pass, remember, when the voices call, your silence is your only lifeline. Sometimes you're warned never to look back. Sometimes you're told not to run. But what happens if, in the most haunted valley of the world, you realize something is already standing behind you, silent, headless, and waiting for your footsteps to stop? My name is Ember. I never went looking for the supernatural. I never chased urban legends or filmed ghost hunts for online clicks. I only wanted wild air, open sky, and the kind of adventure most people promise themselves but never take. I got more than I bargained for. Some stories, like the ones from Canada's Nahanni Valley, don't let go. They retell themselves, again and again, through anyone reckless enough to step into their shadows. I planned the Nahanni trip for months. There was a deliberate poetry to the place, a river so wild it cut through the world's oldest rocks, waterfalls taller than most city buildings, forests so thick that sound felt muffled, like stopping your ears with wool. I read everything about the Naha tribe that vanished, the gold rush prospectors who ended up headless or simply gone, the stories whispered by Dean elders about spirits that walked after sunset. My uncle used to say all legends have roots. Nahanni's roots snaked so deep nobody ever reached the end. But truthfully, I didn't believe. Not really. Not until one September, when 3 friends and I flew in, paddling into Headless Valley at twilight, alone but for the hoot of owls and the far-off crack of rocks falling. Maya was our leader, steady as stone, nerves of steel. Riley was the navigator, obsessed with maps, pacing out distances with scientific precision. Isaac, our bouncer, insisted on carrying the bear canister and an axe, even though he'd never shaved outside a hotel before. And me, I was the dreamer, tasked with documenting the trip, my battered journal stuffed into my jacket, camera always warm in my palm. From the first day, the valley pressed in. The river fields steamed, veiled with morning fog tight as milk. We set up camp on a sandbar fringed with brittle driftwood and the bones of old half-burnt tree trunks. It felt ancient, older than old. We joked about headless ghosts, tried to out-chill each other with facts about the McLeod brothers, the lost trappers, and the unsolved bones. Only Maya seemed truly uneasy. "Be smart, Ember," she said one evening as we watched the aurora flicker. "Don't wander far at dusk. This isn't just land, it remembers." Maybe I should have listened. Our third night, the wind died just after sundown. The river stilled. Everything silent but for Isaac's soft humming. Then we noticed the fire itself seemed stifled, as if the oxygen had fled. The trees around our camp, all black pine and trembling aspen, trembled without wind. Riley kept looking up, frowning at the unbroken sky like he'd misread it. Then, from a gap in the trees, something moved. At first, it was just a band of darkness between the trunks. A shadow. taller than any man. When Isaac turned his flashlight, the beam caught nothing. No eyeshine, no fur, no bark. But the shadow didn't fade. It just stood there. Closer now. Shape becoming real in the gloom. Shoulders, arms, torso, neck, but no trace of a head. Absolutely none. The air turned brittle and sharp all at once, the campfire's glow dimming to orange embers. I felt cold sweat sluice down my spine. I tried to form words, maybe, "Who's there?" But my mouth would not move. Isaac, clutching the axe, stepped forward, but Riley yanked him back. "Don't," Maya hissed, harsh and terrified. The shadow stepped closer. Or maybe there was more than one. The trees beyond our camp bent, as if under invisible weights. I counted 3, 4, then 7, all motionless, headless, as if waiting for something only they could sense. Isaac raised the axe, shouting a name, maybe his mother's, maybe something else. The shadows flickered, overlapping in impossible ways, sometimes thin as reeds, sometimes wide at the shoulders, sometimes armless, always faceless and silent. My camera suddenly felt like a fragile barrier, powerless as glass. We all screamed, fled for the boats, but the sand gripped our boots, and we stumbled. Isaac vanished into the woods. Maya staggered at my side. Riley froze, whispering, "They're here." I hear them. I tried dragging Riley along, but the shadow, closest now, appeared to reach. No hands, no face, only the sound of something heavy breathing where a throat should be. I woke hours later, face down in silt, chilled to the bone. Maya was at my side, shivering, her eyes hollow. Riley lay by the fire pit, hands over his ears, mumbling nonsense, tears streaming down his face. "Isaac." We called and called, but he never answered. We searched all through morning light. The woods, the riverbank, the burnt sweet ruins of an old log shelter nearby. We found only a single muddy boot, toe pointing toward the pines. The sand there was churned, marked by deep drag marks, too wide, too symmetrical for any known animal. No blood, no tracks leading away, just emptiness, hunger, and the forest silence, thick as a secret. Maya called for help on her radio, voice shaking with every word. I scribbled notes, photographing the marks, trying not to see faces in bare branches, or the way fir cones nested together like watchful eyes. Riley stayed catatonic, refusing all food, mumbling, no heads, over and over. That day, the wind never rose. The sky seemed blotched, stained by blue shadow. Maya tried to pack us up, but every effort felt thwarted. The tent zippers jammed, the dry bags split their seams. The canoe felt heavier than it should. We caught flashes, shapes standing at the tree line, just beyond focus, but always there if you looked askance. I stopped taking photos. The lens wouldn't focus anymore. Then, as dusk fell again, the air grew leaden, the forest pressing closer. Maya snapped, shaking me by the arm. "We have to go, now." She and I carried Riley toward the boat. That was when we saw them again, silent as dusk, standing in a ring between us and the canoes, not moving, never speaking. For a moment, everything froze, like the world itself forgot to breathe. An ancient, bitter cold seeped into my veins, and I fell. In that silence, I heard a sound, half gravel, half rustle, like words being ground out of broken stones. "Stay." Maya, trembling, dropped Riley and reached for me, but the shadows shifted, parting just enough for us to drag ourselves past, stumbling to the muddy river. We paddled blind, half mad with terror, not turning back until the current was so strong, so ferocious, it nearly overturned us. The sky at last split with thunder, and rain fell, hard and sour, washing everything but the memory away. We never found Isaac. Rangers said it looked like a bear attack, but no bear tracks, no scat, no fur was ever found. They wrote it up as misadventure. The search was brief. Locals didn't argue or offer comfort. "People vanish in the valley," one said. "Headless Valley takes what it wants, and it never gives it back." After at home, I struggled with nightmares. I'd wake gasping, sure someone, something, stood at the edge of my bed. My camera, covered in sand, held only crude blurs, unrecognizable shadows, blood-red flashes where nothing should be. Riley was never the same, even after therapy. Maya grew silent and withdrawn, quitting expeditions altogether. Our group never met again. I can't go into deep woods. Fog triggers panic. My hands shake at dusk. But worst of all are the dreams. A ring of headless figures standing at the threshold, reaching, silent and swift, asking me to trade stories for peace. They say Nahanni remembers what you take, and if you aren't careful, it will take from you in return. If you ever feel drawn to the unknown, if you ache for places wrapped in mystery, remember that some legends grow from wounds that never heal. The Valley of the Headless Men is more than a story. It's a warning echoing through the ages, waiting for those who believe they're safe just because they carry logic, cameras, or fire. Now, if this tale sent a chill down your spine, if you found yourself glancing at the corner of your room or listening a little harder to the night wind, you belong with us. Haunted Fears exists for seekers like you, brave, curious, maybe a little reckless, craving real horror from the world's darkest places. On our channel, you'll find true accounts, reimagined legends, and untold stories from the farthest edges, always with identities and details changed for privacy, but never shying from the truth. Every story, every nightmare, every mystery is brought forward with one goal: to make you question what you believe is possible. So, where are you watching from? What time is it for you right now? Drop your location and time in the comments. Maybe share if you've ever encountered anything that defies explanation: a light in the woods, a voice on the wind, footprints in new snow that lead to nowhere. Let's see how far the shadows of Headless Valley can reach. And while you're here, don't just listen. Become part of the Haunted Fears family. Subscribe now to never miss a story, to join those who understand that goosebumps aren't just for fiction, and to find company in the dark. Because the real world is stranger and scarier than we can ever imagine. Stay curious, stay safe, and whatever you do, if the Headless Watchers ever appear, don't answer when they call your name.